Hello, my name is Lucio Constantine, and welcome to the show. Today I'll be discussing my top 50 books of the year that I read in 2024. I hope you all are having a wonderful Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, and are celebrating the New Year's. And I wish all you guys the best, and I love every single one of you. Recently, I read 50 books this year, and will be reading less in the next year, as I'll be reading more longer books and be preoccupied with learning Russian and improving my French and Spanish while attending school and work at the same time, along with taking care of my dog. So, without further ado, let's get into the books of 2024. Starting off with honorable mention number one, we have The Catcher in the Rye by J.R. Salinger. Copyright 1945, published in 1951. The book features Holden Caulfield, who gets kicked out of school and is quite disconcerting in regards to society as large and sees everyone as phonies and liars and bad people and is critical towards everything. He receives wisdom from Professor Antonioni, who suggests to him a quote by a psychologist who says, "A fool tries fights nobly for a cause, while a wise man fights hard to win at something or nothing." There are some critics who suggest that Holden is gay, such as the critic Strip Coverlet on YouTube. There are some evidence for this, as Holden doesn't understand sex, and every time he tries to have sex, he fails and doesn't succeed. He, however, has a girlfriend named Sally and has shown an interest towards women. However, this post holds at the concept that he is gay. The book says place in Christmas, and he gets kicked out of a preppy school in high school, and he flunks all his grades, and he fails every grade except English or history, I believe. I'm not sure which one. And there is a scene in the book where he frequently talks to cab drivers and asks about the ducks and what's the deal with the ducks and whether the ducks are fine and where they go when they aren't being fed or whatnot. I thought the book was 3 out of 5 stars, and it did not pique my interest any further, as the book had a sluggish middle and was quite inconsequential in general, and I did enjoy it on the surface level. However, beyond much, it's quite a superficial read. Book number 2 on the list is Flow My Tears, The Policeman Said, by Phillip K. Dick. This book was written in 1974. It takes place in 1988 with a man named Werner who loses his identity and struggles hard to gain his identity back. I, however, did not like this book, as I did not like the main character. You do not have to like a main character in a book in order for a book to be good. However, I did not like the themes in the book, except for the one in which it suggests that when you love someone, you lose yourself in the process of loving someone, and you start becoming less as an individual and more as a unit or team in the process of love and self-transformation. The next book is The Elephant Man by Christine Sparks. It was written in 1980 and directed by David Lynch, starring Anthony Hopkins, who stars in The Silence of the Lambs, and John Hurt, I believe. It features a real-life story of John Merrick, who is in his mid-20s when he is discovered as in a carnival show in London in the 1800s, of having a deformed face that looks like an elephant and has scaly skin. His left arm is fine, but his right arm is deformed his genitals are intact, and he has a bulge on his bald skin, and he wears a top hat and a trench coat. The book is quite predictable, which leaves me to rating it 3 out of 5 stars because of the predictable nature of which I predicted that the book would espouse notions of how humanity is more cruel and evil towards those who are different and other than themselves and treat them unfairly, then composed to those designated as cruel and hideous and unlovable are actually the most kindest and most well respected, or rather well loved and capable of love in untraditional terms. Number 4, Tender is a Flesh by Augusta Bastarrica. It was published in in 2017 by Argentine writer Augusta Bastarrica. It features a story of Marcos, who has an estranged wife named Cecilia and a sister named Marissa, and a father named Don Amarno, who struggles with dementia. And the main plot of the book is about cannibalism becoming radicalized or standard in the modern eating consumption of modern man. It features many themes such as disaster of capitalism, the effects of capitalism in the 21st century, factory farming, how eating meat, according to the author, is cruel and unjust. However, the author was seen wearing a leather jacket, which suggests some inconsistency in the book review. Now, the leather jacket could have been fake leather, but I digress. It's still a leather jacket in the end. It's like saying you're against eating meat, but eat McDonald's every day. It really doesn't matter what you think, but whether what you do that matters. Number 5, In the Dust of This Planet by Eugene Thacker. Eugene Thacker addresses the problem of suffering and the problem of evil in the world. He focuses on demonology, which is the study of demons in religious contexts, and features many subjects of dark material, such as Satanism, occultism, black metal, different types of metal, what metal suggests towards the individual, and how there are more tsunamis, earthquakes, and evil in the world than good. I read this in the beginning of the year, and it was my first review as well. I rated it 4 stars. However, this book did not impact me as much as the other books did, which is why it's in the honorable mentions. Number 5, The Oxford Book of English Verse. Number 5, The Oxford Book of English Verse by Helene Gardner. It compiles a list of several poems and poets from 1250 to 1950. While this may seem interesting and quite good of a read, it is quite boring and sluggish to get through from 1250 up to the 1800s, but this may be partial to me as I only like poems from the 1800s and the 1600s and the 1900s. So I may be partial in my reading bias, but everyone is partial, even the political campaigners, which suggest that they are objective morality or claims towards a will to truth. Number 7, Inside the Criminal Mind by Stanley Samenow. This book was written for psychologists or those interested in psychology. It discusses why criminals do what they do, which is based on the illusion of freedom. However, the author suggests that criminals act the way they do not because of societal pressures or or programmed feelings of emotion as designated by rules of destiny and fate, but rather of their own free will. Members do evil because they are capable of doing evil and conduct their findings and inclinations towards doing evil acts in the end. I disagree with the author's premise and do not believe in the clean slate of identity in which suggests that man is solely responsible for his actions. He is influenced by society, environment, and his parents. Number 8, English Grammar for Students of French, Jacqueline, Morton. This is a short book that you can read in a day, but study for the rest of your life and quite repeatedly. It is an introduction towards French grammar and how to speak French. I am a year into French and I speak Spanish natively and fluently as well. It taught me how to write in French and speak French as well. It is a good read, however, not that interesting if you don't find language learning to be useful for you in the long run. John Constantine, number 9, All His Engines by Mike Carrey. This is a comic book written by DC Comics, created by Alan Moore in Swamp Thing. I don't remember which edition of Swamp Thing, but Constantine is a chain-smoking demon hunter who possesses magical skills. You might have seen him in the Arrow or DC Legends of Tomorrow TV show, in which he performs magic and ritualistic occult behaviors throughout the show. I like John Constantine because he is charming and he knows what he is and he doesn't plan on getting better, which is delightful in a world of phonies and fakes who think of themselves as good people just because they are as bad as other bad men. Number 10, Dashiell Hammet, The Complete Short Stories. Dashiell Hammet popularized the crime novels and pulp novels of the 1900s. It features his most famous stories, The Maltese Falcon, and his less known stories, The Dane Curse. I thought it was quite superficial, as I like stories written in flowery or descriptive ways like Cormac McCarthy, Flannery O'Connor, William Faulkner, Thomas Ligotti, or Raymond Chandler, if you want an alternative to crime novels. The stories are interesting and the plots are complex and dense, as much so as Brick by Rian Johnson, featuring Joseph Gordon-Levitt, which is a movie I love and adore, and was influenced by Dashiell Hammett and the crime novels of the 1900s. Number 11, The Complete Poems of Robert Frost. Robert Frost was born a couple of days after the month of my birthday, March 20th, around that day in the 1800s or 1700s. And he wrote his most famous work, The Road Not Taken, The Road Less Taken, which is how when you're in the middle of a fork in the road, you take the road less taken. If you like poetry, is quite good, and I enjoyed it a fair bit. Number 12, Andy Diggle, Green Arrow, Year 1. This is the origin story of Oliver Queen, who, as you know from the TV show, was trapped in the island after a shipwreck from the Queen's Gambit and spends 5 years training and growing strong as an individual and learning to battle his own demons. I thought this was a good origin story, and the Year 1 and New 52 comics of DC are quite good in general as compared to the modern state of Marvel comics from Craven to Thunderbolts. I enjoyed the Arrow TV show. I'm on season 4 and it's okay so far. The first 2 seasons were the best, and the third season dropped in quality, but it's still quite good. And the fourth season is okay. It's quite procedural in its storytelling. The same problem with Gotham. It's like a superficial watch to watch after work or school. Number 13, Seymour Resnick, Essential French Grammar. This is a book written for those who would like to learn how to write in French. While my writing style in French is quite weak compared to Spanish and English, I do enjoy reading grammar books on French, while most of my learning on French takes place on Duolingo most of the time for 15 minutes or more. Number 14 and last of the honorable mentions list is Immanuel Kant, Prolegomena to any future metaphysics. This book was written in the 1700s, and Immanuel Kant is a philosopher who wrote the categorical imperatives, of which Arthur Schopenhauer believed in 11, which was quoted from Arthur Schopenhauer, The World as Well, a Representation. It discusses what is metaphysics. Is metaphysics a science? How can you derive perception from matter? And where does perception come from? Questions of metaphysics means beyond physics and whether physics can be a beyond of itself in a fundamental sense. If you like further research on metaphysics, I suggest a rather dry work that I left incomplete, which is Aristotle's Metaphysics. Here is the book list of 2024. Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian, number 1. Blood Meridian is a Western, or some would call it an anti-Western, which features the real-life story of the Gallatin Gang in 1840s America before the Spanish-American Civil War, which takes place in 1898 or the 1890s. The book discovers topics such as war and the effects of war and how war impacts men. There is a character named Judge Holden who talks about how war endures and men love war because they see it in themselves to conduct war. It expresses themes of Nietzschean philosophy, which is expressed in the gay signs, where he says even the worst among us is necessary for the flourishing of the human race. So basically, even Hitler or Stalin or Mao or Pol Pot was necessary for the development of morality and ethical questioning. It was written in 1985 and became a classic. It sold few copies, not as much compared to All the Pretty Horses, which is written by Cormac McCarthy. I am planning on the review of Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian. However, after his recent forays with 16 or 17-year-old Augusta Brent is comes into questioning of whether one should endorse his works after all in the long run. In the beginning of the book, it takes place in the 1800s of a real-life meteor shower of 1855 in which people showed concerns of how it was an act and an exposure of God himself throughout the explosion of the comet throughout the western skies. And in the beginning of the book, it talks about how Judge Holden accuses a man of having sexual relations with a minor, which brings into light of Cormac McCarthy himself, which makes all the more sense. Judge Holden is a man of many talents. He speaks multiple languages. He plays the fiddle, and he knows geology, history, math, and philosophy. The story features the kid who gets tangled up in a glancing gang, which is a real life gang in the 1800s. Two, Samuel Chamberlain, My Confessions. This was written in the 1800s and it takes place in the Spanish-American War, in which the author of the book, Samuel Chamberlain, who is quite the ladies' man, and features him showing his prowess with women in general. And it talks about how he lied to gain entry into the Spanish-American War in the side of the Americans. There are frequent mentions of greasers and scalp hunting and war and the philosophy of violence. Number 3, Edith Edgar, The Choice. I met Edith Edgar in California when I was staying there for a year under a therapy session. She is a Holocaust survivor and talks about her experience of losing her family and being separated from her sister during the Holocaust in 1945 to 46. It shows how she danced for Dr. Magdalene, who gave her a loaf of bread if she would dance perfectly for him. Dr. Magdalene was a doctor of death in Hitler's prison camps. In other works like Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl and Primo Levi, The Saved and the Damned, it shows how people can't choose what happens to them, but they can choose how they respond to what happens to them. Number 4, Ferdinand Celine, Journey to the End of the Night. This macabre book talks about the war of World War I and how the main character is stationed from France to different countries. And it starts off like all good French novels do in a cafe where the main character espouses nihilistic and disconcerting thoughts towards the government of France and how everyone believed the war itself was a shame from the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. The book is really funny as well. Number 5, Edward Snowden, Permanent Record. This book talks about Edward Snowden's permanent record of how he leaked NSA documents of mass surveillance. It suggests topics such as the ethical components of what to do when faced with a corrupt government and how to respond to tyranny or evil in forces of which propose themselves to be good or noble or the benefactors of a noble race or class of people. Number 6, Frederick Douglass, The Narrative and Life of Frederick Douglass. This book talks about Frederick Douglass and the life of Frederick Douglass as he learned to read and write on his own while in captivity of slavery and teaches young men how to read and write as well. Number 7, Thomas Ligotti, The Conspiracy Against the Human Race. I talked about this book early on, so I won't be talking about it much here. Number 8, Cambridge Companion Guide to Renaissance Philosophy. Renaissance was in the 1400s in Italy because of the advancements of art and the location of the city in general. It talks about how Renaissance was a way to bring back the works of the Greeks and Romans, such as Plutarch or Petrarch, and it discusses occult philosophy of the 1400s as well. It's a dry read, but worth your while, and it will take a long time to read as well. Number 9, Marcus Chown, Afterglow of Creation. This book talks about the 1960s Arnold Peniaz and Rob Dyke and their creation of the Code Load experiment, which was meant to detect radioactive radiation from the Big Bang or after the Big Bang and detect it in the machine. It's a science book and is similar to Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time. The next book on the list is Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time. This book was featured in the show Hannibal, in which it features a cup reversing back in time and breaking, which is featured in the book as well. I talked about this book early on in my review a while back. Number 11, Chris Palmer, Brain Energy. Chris Palmer was on the Andrew Uberman podcast and has a podcast on his own. And it talks about how every mental disorder is a disorder of the metabolism and a function of a poor mitochondrial system. And as we all know, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. And it features much more than that, in which the author expresses and suggests that the way to solve people who are ingesting too many medications can be reduced to fewer medications, and it showcases the negative effects to eating too much sugar, which I am on a to a sugar-free diet, except for the weekends for my cheat meal. Number 12, Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince, published in 1513. This was published around the time of the Renaissance, and it features about how to rule and how to govern as a prince. And Niccolo Machiavelli is famous for having said, "If a man cannot choose both, it is better to be feared than loved." Number 13, Chuck Palahniuk, Fight Club. This book discusses the effects of toxic masculinity, anarchism, and the spiritual angst of the 1990s, in which people were disparaged or downtrodden and nihilistic, which is shown in the movies with the dark color palettes of the 1990s, from Seven to Blade to many more movies. The book features Tyler Durden and the narrator, who Tyler Durden plans to take over the credit card companies and to blow them all up so that the economy and money gets set back to zero. There is a movie directed by David Fincher starring and Edward Norton and Brad Pitt. Some quotes say goes along the lines of, "We were raised to believe one day we will be rock stars, millionaires, or movie gods, but this is untrue, and we're slowly learning this fact, and we are very pissed off." For further recommendations, I recommend Mr. Robot and They Live. Number 16, Ryan Holiday's The Obstacle is the Way. I enjoy Ryan Holiday's work, however I disagree on his notions of free will and how you don't choose what happens to you, you choose how you react to it. He is a stoic and talks with Casey Neistat in his YouTube videos and runs a bookstore in California, I believe, or Texas. I'm not sure. If you want to learn more about Ryan Holiday, you can read more of his stuff in his other books, or on his YouTube channel. He talks about several philosophers, from Amelia Earhart, who was the first woman who flew across the Atlantic, and to people who overcome what happened to them, which was deemed wrong, from Marcus Aurelius to Demosthenes. Demosthenes shaved off his head and proved to everyone that he could beat the unjust court system that wronged him. Robert Moore's King, Warrior, and Magician. This is number 17 of the main list, and it talks about boy psychology, the anima, and the animus. The anima is a female psychology of the male psyche, and the animus is the reverse. It espouses Carl Jung's theory of psychology and how one can integrate boyhood into manhood. It features several mythological archetypes in the long run. And if you like Jordan Peterson, then I imagine you like this as well. Benjamin Franklin, Silence Doggone, Busybody, Selected Writings. Number 18. He was a delegate for Pennsylvania for 3 years in the 1700s, and when he was 16, he wrote as a mistress or a widow of a woman. The Harvard Classics has an autobiography of him, which you can get for $18 or more on Amazon if you be so inclined. Some of the quotes from Benjamin Franklin is, you cannot have freedom of thought without you cannot have free will without freedom of thought, and you cannot have freedom of thought without the right to determine the actions of every other man. And another quote is, a people will eschew their freedom by their virtue of being so. He talks about how it's important to learn geometry, arithmetic, history, and math. It includes the Articles of Confederation. It includes several opinions on God, such as whether God is capable of intervening and having a personal relationship with individuals in society. And it talks about the politics and actions of man in general. Number 19, Hermann Hesse, Damien. Hermann Hesse was the author of Siddhartha, which is the next book of the video. It is quite short and it features Damien, who shows unconventional, inquisitive depictions of the Bible and religion, which the main character finds intriguing, as he was quite different from the rest of society and the groups of his school. Number 19, Hermann Hesse, or 20, Hermann Hesse, Siddhartha. This book explores the life and works of Siddhartha Gautama, also known as the Buddha. It depicts his life from living in a palace to escaping luxury to experience suffering, which is the prime feature of Buddhism. Nietzsche suggested that Buddhism was anti-life. I, however, disagree, and Buddhism promotes the embracing of one's own suffering in the embarkment of their journey towards self-actualization and life as a whole. If you're a Buddhist or you enjoy short novels that you can read in a day, and if you enjoy works of Buddhism like Thich Nhat Hanh or In the Buddha's Words, then you will enjoy this book as well. Number 21, Lauren Buick's Broken Monsters. This book is about a boy who is sewn into a deer by an artist named Clayton. This isn't a spoiler. It was provided to you by the author within the first 100 pages, and it features a cop as the main character who investigates the murder, and a daughter who gets involved in the crime at the end and helps out the case, a detective named Jenny Q, an artist named Clayton, and it features Reddit, which I found quite amusing, helps out in the case as well. Number 22, Sam Harris, Free Will. This is a book about free will, about how free will is an illusion and how the brain makes decisions before the mind does, 300 milliseconds to 700 milliseconds before the body acts upon it. If you're interested in his podcast, he has a meditation app which you can learn from and benefit from as well. He wrote The End of Faith and he also wrote The Moral Landscape and debated Jordan Peterson and Alex O'Connor. Number 23, Phillip K. Dick, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? This was written in 1968 and takes place in 2021 California, in which animals are a rare commodity and everyone wants to have one, and it features animal rights and a private detective known as Rich Deckard, who is a bounty hunter who earns money by killing criminals or replicants and androids. There is some question about whether Rick Deckard is a replicant and Rachel is an android who he falls in love with as well. The last one on the list, but not the least, before we go on to the next one, I would like to mention that Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep was turned into a movie, one of my favorite movies, by Ridley Scott, called Blade Runner, featuring Harrison Ford as Rick Deckard. Number 24, Ken Casey, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. This was turned into a movie in the 1970s about, with Jack Nicholson as the star, about McMurphy, who gets sent to a nursing home, not a nursing home, but a hospital for the mentally ill, and turns everything around and disrupts the status quo with Nurse Ratched, who is the domineering woman, the Namu of mythology, and the overbearing mother in Jordan Peterson philosophy. She tries to take control of everything and leads to the suicide of several patients, including two of which shall not be named due to spoiler's sake in the book. If you like the book, you should check out the movie. It's one of my favorite movies, and the soundtrack is quite good. The difference is that the narrator in the book is from the chief, who is a Native American, and in the movie, the main character is McMurphy, played by Jack Nicholson. So there you have it, my list of 2024 of a spectacular year for me and hopefully for you. I hope all of you have a wonderful Christmas and celebrate the New Year's or Hanukkah for those who celebrate Hanukkah. And I love all of you and wish all of you good health and goodwill and wish you all the best of luck. Stay frosty, my friends. Thank you for watching, and I love every one of you. This is Lucio Constantine, signing off.